John Tapscott.
And I'm Alex Tapscott.
And this is What's on Tap. Alex, the beginning of season 2. Here we go. First season was great. We covered an awful lot of exciting turf. And you know what? Every week, the viewership of this thing grows, and the listenership too, as it's available on all major podcast platforms. And we took a week off. Better not do that again. So in that 2-week period, boy, a lot of water's gone under the bridge. I think the big one is that NFTs have kind of just exploded into the mainstream. And so here's the question for today. Did digital art take crypto mainstream? Now, you'll remember back in Blockchain Revolution, which was, 5 years ago? 6 when we wrote it. We talked about tokenizing art and how blockchain could help cultural industries and ensure that the creators of value were fairly compensated for that value. We didn't use the word NFTs. We talked about crypto collectibles. But of course, for those of you who've been under a mushroom in the last month, NFT, of course, are non-fungible tokens, and they are a unique digital asset that provably represents one-to-one a piece of art, a digital collectible, or another any rare item. Could be intellectual property, and they sure have taken the world by storm over that period. So August did smash all records for NFT transaction volume. And a big one was OpenSea, a leading NFT platform, tallied volumes of more than $1 billion in a month. So that's more than eBay sales volume in the same period. Yeah. eBay, the Internet of Information. So Alex, why don't we step back here? What exactly are NFTs and how are they changing the zeitgeist?
Yeah, well, as you said, NFTs are provably scarce digital representations of value, so pieces of art, rare collectibles, or other rare items. And right now they're being used primarily for art projects online. And there are a few different kinds of NFTs. There are sort of the one of one or one of totally unique piece of art. So in the spring of this year, there was a big news story that a very famous digital artist named Beeple sold a particular piece of art for $69 million. That's a one-of-one project. What seems to be more common these days are these generative art projects, which are basically these virtual avatars that are created on projects on platforms like OpenSea and others. And, they're basically a series of unique visual, pieces of art, and some of them are more unique than others. They have certain attributes which make them completely unique, and others that are a little bit more common. And that's where we're seeing a lot of the volume exploding. And it really is spilling into the mainstream. We saw Tom Brady has got his own NFT platform. We've seen NBA Top Shots, which was very popular earlier this year. Steph Curry, who is one of the most famous athletes in the world, changed his avatar to one of these generative art projects pieces and spent $180,000 to boot on that. So definitely it's spilling into the mainstream. There's something extremely viral about this. All of a sudden having one of these NFTs is a sign of social status, especially in these very online communities. And as a result, everyone's sort of clamoring to demonstrate, in effect, to their social circle and their peer group and to their professional, colleagues and so forth, that they're in on this. And as a result, it's really actually spread like wildfire. Whether or not it's moving too far too fast, we'll see. The value, according to recent analysis of all NFTs, is around $11 billion, which is tiny, I guess, in comparison to all of the art that exists, all the art and cultural artifacts that exist in the world. But it's still a pretty big number. Like the art market, in terms of the transaction volume on an annual basis, is about $67 billion. And so we've already got 11 billion of NFTs in like a few months. Now, NFTs have been around for many years. They were called something different in the past, but really the rubber has hit the road this year. So, to me at least, it's a really exciting thing. It is exciting that there is a mechanism by which creators can monetize digital art. And I think it's, obviously very fascinating. And I think it's probably here to stay and is only going to continue to accelerate. There will be bumps in the road, but the fact of the matter is, we as a society are spending more and more time online. Art and other, discretionary purchases have always been about status. You go to someone's house and they have a certain artist hanging on the wall. That tells you something about who they are. It tells you that they're tuned in, that they're rich,
Yeah.
etc. And so if we're spending more time online, then shouldn't all of our status symbols be digital? Like, why should we be spending money on sports cars and physical art and gold watches when we could be spending it on digital artifacts that say the same thing about who we are, right? So, if you believe that humanity is moving more into a virtual world, a metaverse, whatever you want to call it, then I think there's obviously going to be a huge market for these kinds of things in the future.
Well, let's pursue that metaverse idea. So this is an idea that's been around for quite a while. And if you go way back, I remember I spent a lot of time in Second Life. And I had an avatar, and that avatar went in there and it did all this stuff. It was business stuff that I did. I gave a lecture that 150 people attended, and there were all these avatars in the audience nodding and clapping. And I put up my virtual PowerPoint onto a virtual screen in a courtyard inside Second Life. But NFTs are really and the tokenization of assets is really taking this whole metaverse idea to a new level. And that's why there's all this buzz about it today.
Yeah, well, Second Life was an early example of this. And, in the end, I think that the product market fit was maybe not for PowerPoints. It was for concerts and things like that. So to build on Second Life, there's this massive video game called Fortnite, where some of the most popular musicians will play concerts where millions of people will attend virtually in these environments. And in places like Fortnite, in closed environments like Fortnite, people are also spending millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on virtual items. What's different, though, of course, is that those particular virtual items exist inside the walled garden that's created by the video game company. The same would be true in Second Life. I think they had their own currency, but try spending that at Walmart, right? So what's different about crypto assets and about NFTs is that they're composable, meaning, and they're transferable, so they can be moved from wallet to wallet. They're not confined to a specific universe created by a company or even by sort of a closed platform. So that's something that's really exciting, and you can really start to tease out what that could mean. If we're talking about assets that are rare and have certain attributes. Well, it could be assets in virtual worlds and virtual games. It could be pieces of art. It could also be identities. That's what people are increasingly using their NFT avatars for. So if you can prove that you have a particular piece of art or a particular image, which is what an NFT allows for, then you can use that image as your virtual avatar, as the virtual self. Now, it doesn't confer any special rights. It's not like your credit score is attached to it or something like that. But it is, I think, that the basis of a persistent digital identity. Yeah, and it could be, right? So eventually.
Yeah. And for sure, the pandemic has sped this up as it sped up all things digital. So we're now shopping online, we're entertaining ourselves online, and learning online, and working online, and we're working out online with Pelotons. And this progression has been accelerated by years and even decades in some cases, which is why you see a lot of major players talk about these hybrid worlds, and there may actually be a role for the metaverse. It's very different than was initially conceived. I know I can't talk much about this now, but I'm headed off to Korea in the fall, where there's a massive initiative involving the mayor, one of the biggest cities in South Korea, to launch a whole metaverse where citizens are each going to have an avatar, and they'll be able to do all kinds of things, get services there, vote there, participate in referendums and town hall meetings, and but also to do all kinds of commercial things as well, as businesses will be in that environment. So I guess another related question to this is that we've been focused on art, but of course there are all kinds of pieces of value besides art that are non-fungible. And you think about other industries where this whole thing is potentially applicable, like financial services. Art's a big market, maybe 67 billion, but that's kind of gets lost in the rounding figure of securities, for example. So, what could be the impact of all of this on Wall Street?
Yeah, well, I think it tells us something about the viral nature of these kinds of systems, projects, whatever you want to call it. We've talked about the DeFi industry before, and DeFi is, I think, probably a bigger industry than NFTs, but it is batting or it's punching well below its weight relative to the size of the thing it's trying to tackle. We talked about NFTs. This is the hottest story in the art world today. I don't think the hottest thing or the most disruptive thing in financial services today is DeFi, not yet. Even though it's grown from, $1 billion to $150 billion of total value locked. In other words, assets that are captured in the DeFi ecosystem, still $150 billion is very small, relative to the assets under management or the deposits of any major financial institution, right? So, let alone the industry as a whole. So we're a long way from that. But I think what it tells you is it shows you what kind of adoption curve you can get when things start to spread and become viral. So, I think the growth curve for both DeFi and NFTs looks very promising. In DeFi's case, it's grown from, I think, around $1 billion or $2 billion. I guess 1 year ago today, it was maybe more, let's say $4 or $5 billion to $150 billion. So at that growth rate, it'll be bigger than the entire global financial system in 5 years. Now, I don't think that's the rate that we'll continue to grow at, but definitely we're seeing that happening. And, NFTs are an asset that I think can be applied to certain assets, obviously, in the virtual world, though most securities are fungible by design, right? So if you own a share of Google, it has the same rights and properties as the next share of Google, unless they're different class. But one class, there could be tens of millions of a single class. So NFTs, I think, have limited utility in that respect, but there are plenty of other kinds of assets that are unique. So I do think we're very early. We're not sure where this will spill into, but it's quite obvious that it's really caught on.
Yeah, and of course, securities can be tokenized, just not as an NFT, but as a different kind of token.
Yeah, it's like lots of crypto assets are fungible. Bitcoins are fungible.
Sure.
One Bitcoin's the same as the next Bitcoin.
And a share in General Motors is a share in General Motors.
Exactly.
It's the same class. So
yeah, exactly.
Alex, this is funny. It's reminding me in Blockchain Revolution, prior to the book, I purchased an NFT. Now, it was a token that represented a piece of physical art, which I bought. I bought this with Bitcoin like 6-7 years ago, and it's hanging on the wall in our office, and it's a gorgeous piece of art. It's a little tiny micro centimeter of a physical euro, a bill, which has been blown up like thousands of times. And it's beautiful in its color, and you look at it and you wonder what it is, and it sort of has a feel to money. And the token that I own represents that art, but it also represents a 1/10 interest in the mother piece that all of these pieces of art came from. And this was done through a company called Artlery. I don't know if they're still around, but I'm sure the token is still around. And because, I must check out to see if that thing is actually worth something, because the physical piece of art is beautiful. And this would have certainly been one of the very first NFT. We didn't call it that back then, but that's what it was.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we'll see if your NFT is worth more than the Bitcoin you spent on the piece of art, right? Let's hope. But this was
oh, that's a very good point.
$300.
Yeah.
So if you spent 10 Bitcoin on this thing, then I don't know.
Yeah.
It'd be hard to face.
Touche.
You know, yeah, well, it's a fascinating story, and it actually reminds me of a project. So Damien Hirst is a very well-known contemporary artist, probably the most well-known living artist today, one of them, and he's quick to get on this bandwagon, so to speak. And he actually has a project that's kind of similar to this. And I spoke about this briefly on another podcast, DeFi Decoded, which I host with a colleague, Andrew Young. But Andrew brought this up, and I think it's worth mentioning to our audience too, which is that Damien Hirst created a series of physical art pieces of artwork. He has a very famous thing called his dots, and each of these different pieces is about this big, and it has the dots. And these kinds of prints that he does routinely sell for thousands of dollars, maybe more, per print. What he did this time, though, is for every physical print, he created an NFT version of the same print. And people are able to buy both today, but in 1 year, they have the choice, the owner, of destroying one or the other. You either destroy the physical piece or you destroy the NFT. So you can clearly provably burn a piece of art, and they'll actually record the video of them destroying your physical art, or you can provably burn an NFT. That's a process that is very easy to do with tokens, to destroy a token. So the question now is, in a year's time, what will the holders of this piece of art do? Will they decide to keep the virtual art, or will they choose to keep the physical art? And it's an interesting question for a couple of reasons, because one of the prime critiques of NFTs is, well, I can just copy and paste an image, so why is that valuable? And why can't hang it in my house? And how am I supposed to show it off and all this stuff? And yeah, maybe those are valid criticisms. But if in a year's time we find that most people decide to keep the NFT and not the physical art, it kind of undermines that whole thing.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of the perfect embodiment of the Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message, right? Mm-hmm. In this case, you are given two exact identical copies of the thing, one physical, one virtual, and you're choosing the virtual because of the medium. The only reason you're choosing it is because of the medium. So the medium has become the message. It's your way of signaling that is the more important thing to you. And I think that hard-pressed to find a more crystal clear example of that aphorism in action, in my view.
Now, I haven't heard of this. So he's doing this as an experiment?
Well, it's a money-making experiment, yes. Yeah. And so he sold the original pieces for $2,000 each, but they're now selling in the aftermarket for $50,000. So he created thousands of things worth $50,000 worth, that he sold for $2,000. So he's making money, but it is an experiment. The purpose of the project is to tease out what is the art and what matters to the buyer. And I think that's pretty fascinating.
Well, and one of the original ideas of this is that you represent a piece of art by a token, and then as the art moves along, the physical art moves along and sold, the token could go with it. So you understand the provenance of the art, but you would also know you could know all kinds of stuff about it, like not just who bought it and how much they paid for it, but where was it displayed and what temperature was it held at, and so on. And one of the ideas you may remember from the book way back was that that piece of art, that when you created that art and you sold it as an artist, you could hold a residual interest in the art, like say 10%. Yeah. So if you sold it for $500 because you're an up and coming artist, and then it's worth $500,000 later on, you would receive some additional value. So just a lot of potential here around art alone. And then you apply this more broadly across the economy. It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Well, this is something that I'm going to be talking about in this new report that I'm working on, looking at the digital asset revolution.
Yeah.
And we're reassessing our token taxonomy that we developed for the second edition of Blockchain Revolution, which I think held up pretty well. We had 7 different kinds of tokens, and I think probably 6 of them are going to survive to the next iteration of this taxonomy. So,
This one was called crypto collectibles, as I remember.
yeah, we're just going to rename it NFTs because there's a term of art or industry term now for it, but it's the same basic thing. And there's a couple of others. The concept of a utility token, I think, didn't pan out, but in other respects, dApps, distributed apps that have native tokens are very important and popular, and they have a new name called governance tokens, which I think in effect is similar to what a utility token is in some ways. So anyway, so this is going to be something that we're going to reproduce as part of the lead up to the new book, Digital Asset Revolution, which is going to come out in the spring of next year. And it's sort of in keeping with the focus at the BRI on some of these open protocols and some of these, more crypto-focused applications of blockchain, which I think is a good sort of reminder that you guys produced this big report that came out comparing 2 of the leading public protocols and explored their usefulness for the enterprise. And I thought that'd be an interesting thing to talk about.
For sure. In that report, it happens sometimes. That report was proprietary for the members, but somebody communicated it to somebody, and now it's gone. It's in the public now. Last time I looked, it had like hundreds of likes and many RTs and so on. And the general reaction to the report is that it's enormously helpful. A Digital Asset Revolution, your new book, will in fact be out in early January. We're rushing hard on a target publication date like that. And just to remind everybody, Platform Revolution, my new compendium of the best of the BRI around this topic, comes out October 14th, and you can pre-order it now on Amazon.com, .ca, whatever. And by platform, we're talking about how blockchain is a platform for trivergence, the AI and machine learning and the Internet of Things. And these 3 technologies are coming together to create essentially the next era of the digital age. And, we wrote the book, and blockchain was an idea, it was the Internet of Value and so on. Now it's really becoming the platform for all these technologies that will transform the nature of the corporation, the way that supply chains work, the way that we manage our identities and countless other things. So Platform Revolution, Don Tapscott on Amazon.com. Go pre-order it now. I'll mention a couple of other things. On this topic of NFTs, 3 years ago, we wrote a paper on this, introducing the idea of an NFT. I don't think we invented the word, but it was one of the first big documents on this idea. It was written by good guys, worked with us for a couple of decades, 3 now, named Alan Major. Alan has a whole new project and report that's coming out in a couple of weeks. Now, this was before our members initially, but will be released. And that's on NFTs and sort of like the next era, the next generation. The other thing that I'll mention is that everyone, Alex and I, due to popular demand, will be answering questions that flow from our conversations here on What's on Tap. And this will be on Twitter and Instagram. So stay tuned to us on Twitter and Instagram. I'm D Tapscott on Twitter, and Alex is Alex Tapscott. And then on Instagram, we're easy to find. Anything else for this week, Alex?
No, great start to the season, and we look forward to answering questions and to exploring more exciting topics.
Okay, that is what was on tap. And we'll see you next week, same place, same time, same podcast platform or on YouTube. Take care, everybody.